Colonel Kenneth Jones is Director of Science and Technology at the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. Colonel, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
We were talking a little bit before we turned the cameras on about one of your priorities is getting data from sensor to shooter. How are you getting after that, and how are you looking to industry to help you get after that?
It sounds like a simple process. Just taking, as simple as things are these days, the internet, you're tapping a server across the world probably, maybe, and you're bringing it to your computer screen, so it sounds very simple. But we're talking about a multitude of systems of various form factors, whether it's an aircraft, a ground, a satellite, a node that someone has far forward. It's very difficult to bring all that data together, to collate that. And one of the hardest things for the longest time was getting organizations to work together. For the longest time, they just wanted you to buy the whole sensor to shooter package from them. They wanted to sell you the bird, they wanted to sell you the missile, they wanted to sell you the truck, they wanted to sell you the software and the laptop. That's not the case anymore. And I think industry is understanding that they have to go towards open architecture. And so the challenge now is getting these different companies, software applications, platforms. What we try to communicate to them is you have to be able to work with your competitor. You have to have your data, be able to share with someone else's data, not just within the Marine Corps, but across the joint force. That's awesome if I'm able to utilize Marine Corps data from Marine Corps sensors, but you're not getting the richness of the data if you're not tapping into whether it's national technical means, other services, other agencies. I want as much data as I can. I want to bring that together, collate it, fuse the data, and then be able to get that to a shooter to prosecute a target.
Mm-hmm. The sensor to shooter dialogue is interesting to me too, because I imagine there's a threshold at some point where the shooter has more information than that person can use. So I imagine there's an element of getting the right information from sensor to shooter. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, and you can certainly have information overload, and that's why we just want to have a singular application of some sort. Now, one of the biggest challenges with what you just described is that there are going to be multiple applications. I think some think there's one application to rule them all. As soon as you start to introduce a new one, they go, well, I like my application. Well, the function of that application is probably different from this one. We have to figure out, how do we connect all those? When do I need this application? At what echelon do in that application? And then where does that data need to go? At a higher echelon of command, at a combatant command. For us, the MEF is the highest level, all the way down to company and battalion. And the challenge also is the bandwidth. I don't have great bandwidth down at that lower level. If I'm sitting in a large headquarters, or if I'm sitting in a structure, maybe somewhere in a large city, that's where the combatant command is, then maybe I have unlimited pipes. I can bring in large amounts of data. I need to be able to get that data down to a unit that doesn't have that amount of bandwidth, maybe doesn't have the processing power. So there's all kinds of challenges. It's very complex. We have an organization right now called Operation Dynamis. It's not really an organization, it's more of an effort. And they're taking existing platforms, they're taking software from multiple vendors, and they're making sure that I can take that data that I'm talking about from a sensor to this application on this platform, share it maybe laterally to another platform, and then eventually bring it into, as you described earlier on, is how do I make that data simple and then manageable so that I don't have 6 laptops sitting in front of me, right, and I'm monitoring the COP, the common operating picture here. I'm getting targeting data on these 3 laptops. One of the things we have done is we've taken a laptop, and think about just your iPhone or your iPad. I'm able to tap into different applications on that one device. And so we're doing that with the Marine Corps. We're able to port applications into a laptop with a server. It's a very simple system. But you still have to figure out, as you described, how do I simplify that data? What's the actionable data that, as you described, the user needs to then send to a shooter? And does that pathway work? Are they on the same network? Can I send it out to the shooter, whether it's an aircraft, unmanned, manned system, down to an artillery unit that's rockets, HIMARS, cannon? Can I get that down to them? It's complex, but that's the largest challenge we have right now.
I would propose too that you talked about the importance of getting this information, being able to share not just among Marine Corps personnel, but also joint force personnel. Right. So I'm thinking about that in my brain on a horizontal level, right, and then I'm thinking vertically about allies and partners in an operational environment too. How does that inform the way that you're trying to get after these issues?
So my previous job, I was at 2MEF. We primarily are focused, and they are now focused in the Caribbean, but our previous focus was on EUCOM. And so one of the things, the challenges that we had is in order to share with our partners and allies is what we use is called a CDS, a cross domain solution. How do I get that data from my enclave into their enclave, ensuring I'm not providing data that they can't have access to? So there's a security classification issue. So I need to be able to share that with allies and partners. I have to know what I can and can't share. That's another tall task. And this is all part of this we now refer to as CJAD C2, right? So it's our ability to share data across the joint force with allies and partners. And then what data, where's the data coming from? It's all very difficult, but there are things that we're currently working through right now.
And it must be instantaneous too, I imagine.
Because there's at some point that data becomes bad. That data is no longer useful. We use the very esoteric term of data latency.
Yeah.
So once that target, that data that I have on the target is no longer targetable,
right,
it's not useful to me. So absolutely, we talk about target custody, and then when I transfer that to a partner or ally, how long does that process take? You're right. It's probably not instantaneous. There's probably at some point where somebody's going to look at that data before it gets pushed to the next either echelon or ladder, like we talked about. So there's going to be a man on the loop. Eventually you get to where that data comes, it goes through perhaps some curation in the system, and then it maybe goes to a partner or ally or goes down to a shooter. When I was an artilleryman, kind of for us, the best thing we could possibly do is have a radar sense a target. And like you described, it went through all the systems down to me on the gun line, and I was able within seconds to put rounds on a mortar position in Iraq. That was amazing. So someday perhaps we get to that point where data goes from an exquisite sensor all the way down to a shooter. It's been curated. Maybe AI has helped to inform it. It's through machine learning, has learned what's good data and bad data, understands what data latency is, and then gets down to a shooter.